All right, Faby, tell us, what did you bring?
Hi, I have a manipulative toy.
Oh, manipulative toy. I like it. It's so colorful. All right, we'll find out more about this in a moment. And Jacqui, what did you bring?
I brought a box of laminated quotes.
Hmm. Oh, we might have to pull a quote before we're done here. Well, thank you two for coming. First of all, welcome to you two. Welcome to everyone that might be tuning in to this episode of Not Quite Strangers. It's an opportunity to bring two people together who do not know each other, hence not quite strangers, and build connection, right? Also inspire curiosity, and we might even challenge the status quo. I don't know. We'll see how this conversation goes. My name is Valerie Hope. I am your host, and I brought together two amazing human beings. As usual, this program, I only bring amazing human beings to come and have these conversations, but I've known Faby for like maybe 2 years, Faby, I think. It's been a couple years.
Yeah, a little over 2 years, maybe.
Little over 2 years. Faby and I participate in Toastmasters, and we've been in the same club for the last couple years. And she's done some really amazing things in her career around working with children as a speech therapist. So I'm like, I wonder who I might invite to speak with you, Faby. And I thought about, and Jacqui, you and I have known each other
A little bit more than 2 years.
a little more than two. I think we met, what 20?
Give away my age.
A couple of decades. It's been a couple of decades at least that we first met when we traveled together and Up with People. You were a participant in the program. I was a staff member. And we've just been like, social media connected, and you reached out to me like a couple months ago. I can't remember.
Yeah, a few months back. Yeah.
I don't even remember what or how we got reconnected, but we ended up having a conversation, and I was like, oh my goodness, I know you should be on my podcast too. And then Faby's gonna be, the two of you should come together, because Jacqui, you were sharing some of the things that you were doing around mental health in Ireland, where you are, and Faby, you here in Dallas, Texas. So of course, these are two perfect, not quite strangers to introduce to one another. First of all, welcome to the show to the two of you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. What had you say yes?
I'll start. I'm having a kind of a year of saying yes. I changed careers at the end of August in 2020. Probably not the best time that most people would choose to change careers in the middle of a pandemic. So I've just been embracing every opportunity that's come up since, and trying to say yes to lots of new things. So hadn't done a podcast before. You kind of said, I would like you to do a podcast. I went, yeah, okay, why not?
The year of yes. Ooh.
A year of yes. Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you. I'm glad that I got to be one of your first yes experiences. Well, not maybe the first yes experience, but at least from the podcast standpoint. And I'd maybe go back and we'll talk a little bit more about what else you said yes to that might be interesting.
I might be able to tell you all about that.
Then is a G-rated show. So
I'm kidding.
Got it. And Faby, what about for you? What had you say yes?
Well, I always enjoy time with you, and I have a lot of admiration for you. So I thought it would be a really nice opportunity for me to kind of expose people to what communication disorders are and just share my experience with that.
Excellent. Well, and I know I've been kind of nudging you. I'm like, Faby should have her own podcast, but that's okay. You got to be on one to have one, probably, get the experience. So who knows?
Yeah, one thing at a time.
One thing at a time. Well, I really appreciate that. So I've asked you guys to bring these objects, and specifically something that represents your gift, right? And your desire to serve other people. So we'll start with you, Faby. You showed us this box of, you said manipulative or manipulated toys.
It's a toy, and it's like a Santa, and then you put the string and you can make it look different ways.
They're like puzzle pieces, it looks like, that you can connect. Okay, yeah.
And I really like this because it can with my students or my kids that I work with during therapy, it'll really facilitate a lot of conversation and creativity. So that's why I picked this item.
Interesting. And so when you're talking about the kids that you work in therapy, tell us a little bit more about your world, just for people to have some context for what you do. Oh, did I freeze? Did you?
No, I think
no, Jacqui,
Gabby's frozen.
Faby, you froze.
Faby's frozen, sorry.
Oh no. All right, Faby, you're frozen right now, so I don't know if you can hear us, but we'll have Jacqui share her what she brought.
I'll go
her
ahead.
Box of quotes.
Briefly,
We'll
yeah. So this is a box of quotes that I used in my previous job, and it started out with my being a fan of Pinterest, and I love quotes and I collect quotes. And then I would often share these quotes with the teenagers and the young people I was working with. So then I started printing off the quotes and laminating them. So they're very rough and ready. But I would give most of the kids I was working with a quote or two at the end of every session we had. And I didn't realize the impact that was having until I was leaving, and the amount of teenagers who came back and said, "Oh, I'm gonna miss you. I have your quotes all up around my mirror. I have my quotes up on your wall, on my wall, or I have my quotes in my pocket or my wallet." And so I just, it's a really meaningful thing for me that there are little quotes floating around that I passed out to people over the years.
I love it. You're going to have to read a quote in a second. I think we lost Faby's connection. So in case you guys were wondering why she's being so silent, because she's not here right now. She'll connect
back in a minute.
She will connect in just a moment. But tell us, give us one of the quotes. I'd love to hear.
I'll just pick the top one off the pile. It says, "When someone says you can't do it twice and take pictures." So some of them are kind of encouraging. Some of them are uplifting. Some of them are inspiring. Next one would be, "We're stuck inside a giant floating orb in the middle of nowhere. It's okay to feel a little lost sometimes."
Where did you found these on Pinterest?
They're on Pinterest, yeah. And I just printed off a number of sheets of them, and then I would laminate them. And when I run out, I would do another batch.
And what was it that inspired you?
Of new ones. And so, yeah, I always have a box.
What inspired you? I think we're having a little
What inspired me?
Yeah, what inspired you to give them? At what point did you decide, hey, this person could use one of these quotes?
Well, I was giving them anyway, verbally, for a long time, and then I suppose when Pinterest became so popular, and I realized there were a lot of extra quotes on Pinterest, and that they were really beautiful, because they have the visuals. So I just loved that everything was unique and that you could print them off and use them. So I had been giving them out anyway, but it was just taking it to a different level, I suppose, to print them off and have the visual as well.
I think that's fantastic. I love quotes too. And what was your criteria for choosing the quote? What would make you go, "Oh, this one is worthy of being printed and laminated"?
It has to be kind of short and sweet. It can't be a big, long poem. It has to be uplifting or thought-provoking.
Got it.
So okay. They would be my criteria: uplifting and or thought-provoking.
Got it.
Yeah.
I love those. I think I don't collect them like you in an organized fashion like that. Well, I do actually I put them in my notes app. And so I always go back. The only thing what I love about it is I can just search for a word, because I don't always remember the quote, but I'm like, oh, it says this one word, and then I can find it. I don't think I would have much luck looking through a box though.
It's not a very big box.
That is a tiny, yeah.
I just kind of rumble through them until I find the ones I want. And I usually have 2 or 3 printouts of each one. Because sometimes you have a favorite few that you share with a few people, depending on the situation. So some of them are about grief, some of them are about anxiety, some of them are about courage, some of them are about picking yourself up after fall, all those kind of things that people just want a bit of reassurance on. Excellent.
Well, I don't want to talk too much about who you give these to yet, because I wanted Faby to be here to hear it. So she's back. Welcome back. Yes, no, that's okay. When we're dealing with technology, all bets are off. We just hope for the best. All right. So you're good. You're back. You missed this whole story about these quotes, these amazing quotes that Jacqui no, I'm kidding. It was nice, but we don't have to go back into it. But I do want, Jacqui, I want you to share the people you said you give these quotes to, the people that you've worked with for so many years, which is one of the things that inspired me to invite you to meet Faby. Tell us a little bit about that work.
So I worked, Faby, with young people, children and adolescents in child and adolescent mental health up until last August. And at the end of every session, I used to, not at the end, but normally I would be giving them quotes or mentioning quotes that I really liked. And then I found Pinterest, and Pinterest had all these beautiful visual quotes. So I started printing them off and giving them to the kids I was working with. So they just look like this, or different pictures on them. And when I was finishing up, I didn't realize how meaningful they found it. I just enjoyed giving them. But a good few of them kind of said, oh, I'm going to miss you. I have your quotes up all around my mirror, or I have your quotes up in my room or in my wallet or whatever. So I realized just how much that meant to them to have. I guess it's like a little gift, even though it was such a small thing. It's like a little gift to take away and to think about.
Mm. Well, especially if you go through all the trouble of putting them together and, packaging it so nicely. What I'm curious about for the two of you is both of you chose to work with young people, right? And I know you're in transition, Jacqui, but Faby, I'm curious about for you, what is it that inspired you to do the kind of work that you chose?
I've always enjoyed helping people. And it wasn't my initial career choice, but I think that it was on my path, definitely. And when I learned about communication disorders, what it entailed, I thought it was the perfect fit for me. And it really has been. So it's very rewarding to me whenever I can help my students or my patients make progress with their communication skills. Some of them, it's with talking, it can be stuttering, it can be errors in their sounds, and for others, it's language, understanding directions, the ability to respond to things as well. So that's it for me.
That's what drew your attention. It's funny. I thought about you the other day because my nephew, he's 10 now, and he stutters. I think I've shared this with you. And for the first time, it's not something that happens often, but every once in a while it comes up. And we were spending some time together a couple of days ago, he and his siblings, and the siblings went off someplace to go play or do something. And so I was with him one-on-one, and I just asked him, I'm like, hey, so I noticed you stutter. Do you know when you stutter and when you don't? Like, can you tell the difference of when it comes on? And as he was explaining, he started stuttering even more. And I got so nervous. I'm like, oh no, I provoked it. I'm like, oh. But it was interesting, at least to have a conversation. And he explained what he explained. He said, sometimes some words, when I talk too fast, or if I'm, when I, don't take my time, or if some words are difficult. But I'm curious about how, and I'll ask you this, Faby, but Jacqui, maybe you have something that you want to weigh in on this too, but how do you, when you're working with young people, how do you make it safe for them to talk about something like that, like mental health or maybe a speech challenge that they're having?
That's a good question. I think one of my colleagues actually shared something with me a few years ago that I found really helpful. And he said, to get people talking, you have to start with the speakable and move to the unspeakable. It's like on a spectrum. So you start literally with small talk and just making them comfortable and talking about whatever their interests are, whatever their hobbies are, anything that's easy to talk about, that doesn't put them under pressure, that doesn't create anxiety, that is just whatever they want to talk about. You talk about school, you talk about friends, you talk about whatever. And you very quickly pick up, I'm sure you find this as well, Faby, when you're tuning into people, you very quickly pick up where there's a topic that's a raw subject, or something that triggers something in somebody. You can read it off their body language, and then you kind of park that for a while. You don't just go for the jugular straight away. You park it for a while, and then later, when you've built the trust and the communication, then you start digging a little bit deeper. But it's really quite a slow process sometimes. It depends on the young person. Some people are very open, some kids are much more closed. It depends. But it's really finding that way along that spectrum from what's speakable to what's more difficult to talk about.
Speakable to unspeakable. Yeah, Fabi, what do you think?
I agree. You have to make them feel comfortable, at ease, and then just kind of gradually work your way to some of that stuff. Like you're talking about your nephew and his stuttering, and I'm sure that he knows when he's going to stutter. And I'm sure that there are different types of stuttering. So he might just change the content completely just to avoid an episode where he's going to stutter. So just bringing awareness to that, as well as making them feel very, very comfortable so that it's a safe zone for them to express themselves.
Yeah, I think this idea of going from the speakable to the unspeakable kind of applies to even this conversation here. I mean, you guys don't know each other, right?
It really does.
Literally met 30 minutes ago or something like that. So, and we started talking about this, I guess the speakable would be the weather, how hot it is in Texas, how rainy it's been
Exactly.
in Ireland, right? And now we're going for the jugular. I don't have enough time to warm up to it, Jacqui. I'm sorry.
Yeah, work away. It's okay. I'm an open book.
No, but I think what would be interesting also, Jacqui, is for you to share, like, what was it that inspired you to work with the population that you work with? Like, what drew you to working with young people, and what's drawing you to shift?
What drew me to working in mental health first, because I started out in generic social work and then I did a master's in social work, which was also a generic master's, was that by the time I did my master's, I had travelled enough with people and met a lot of young people and done a lot of work in schools and community service stuff with upward people. I didn't set out to work with young people. I just kind of fell into it, really. I ended up doing a placement on my master's in pediatrics in a regional hospital. And that was not my choice. I never wanted to do child protection social work, ever, ever, ever. And I was very clear about that in my head. But there was a sort of a pressure through the colleges that you kind of have to do a child protection placement, because that's where the majority of the jobs are in social work in Ireland. And it's a good experience to have. So I kind of did that to tick the box. Didn't love that placement. It was a very informative, very educational placement, but I didn't love it. But while I was on placement, we had opportunities to visit other social workers in other areas, and we were encouraged to do so, because it's a 14-week long placement. So it's a good long placement. And I visited a social worker who was working in child and adolescent mental health services. And I spent a day hanging out with him and asking him about his job. And I remember having a conversation with him over lunch and saying, oh my God, you know, you're working with kids and teenagers, and do you not worry that you could get it wrong and you could mess up their heads? And, you know, like mental health and kids, like, oh my God, how do you do that work? You know? And I remember him saying, and it stayed with me my entire career. He said, look, it doesn't matter if you have 4 doctorates in psychology. It doesn't matter if you have a master's in child behaviour studies. It doesn't matter. If you can't connect with the kid, forget about it. You have nothing. If you can connect with the kid, if you can do that much, the rest will just come. Because once you build that trusting relationship, they will work with you. And that stayed with me, and that really inspired me. And actually, that social worker, when I finished my master's, contacted me and told me there was a job coming up in CAMS and did I want to interview for it. So I just kind of fell into it. It was my first job and I did it for about a year, and then I moved into adult mental health for a while. And then I worked overseas, and then I came back into child and adolescent mental health services. And I suppose having had the experience of adult mental health was really interesting as well, because I loved working in adult mental health. I loved mental health from the beginning. But I did find that working, and you probably find this, Faby, as well, working with children it's just really rewarding, because they have incredible resilience and they bounce back a lot quicker than adults. So there's a lot more turnover in child and adolescent mental health. You don't tend to have, you do have some long-term cases, but it's much easier to get people in, make a difference, and get them out again, out of the service, which is lovely. Whereas with adults, you might be working with someone over a number of years and kind of holding the space for them, but it's not as quick a recovery for most.
Is that true, Faby, for you?
Yeah, it's true. Like when you connect with the kids, when you have that relationship, they will work with for you so much better. They're more cooperative, and they want to make you proud. You can see it in their little face, and that's incredibly rewarding. So that's how it is for me as well.
I think I obviously don't work in the same field that you do, but my nieces and nephews, especially my older nieces, she is 15, and then I have a 12-year-old niece right under her. They live close by, so I spend quite a bit of time with them. And they accuse me on occasion of life coaching them. That's like the thing. If I ask that one question or two questions about something, they're like, "Are you life coaching me right now, Tia Valerie?" I'm like, "No, I'm just curious. What?" So I make them think. But I think, to both of your points, I think the idea of connecting with them is really important to me, like understanding why they think what they think or why they behave the way they behave. And not that I use it for leverage necessarily. There's nothing that I need from them per se, but I know that my requests or when I have to correct something, it goes further. Like there's fertile ground, right? To have maybe a more difficult conversation, or to ask them for something that they're probably like, "Oh, I don't want to," right? Because I've spent some time getting to know them and connecting. So I get that from that perspective. I think just working with kids. I'm curious about the two of you. What's been the impact of the work that you do? Like I get the fulfillment of working with other clients, but how does it impact you, good or bad? Either of you can go first. Let's hear from Faby first, actually. I'm curious on it.
It impacts me on, I feel like you have to continuously be educating yourself, and you have to understand how, specifically talking about kids and specifically talking about those early years. I would say like 0 to 3, like really educating yourself on how to stimulate them. And I think had I not had this career, I would have never really been thought about how important it is to educate yourself, to provide that stimulus and know how to stimulate them in various ways so that they can have those opportunities.
Can you tell us, Faby, of a time where you felt like there was something that you needed to learn, or something that you needed to I don't know, maybe a challenge you were experiencing that you're like, okay, I need to go get some education about this to deal with it better?
Yes.
And this is, by the way, not an interview. Like I don't have a job to offer you or a promotion or anything like that. So anything goes. I'm really more curious about you and your experience than the question may have sounded. It sounded like a traditional interview question. Give us an example of when you've dealt with a child and you've had to find additional education for yourself.
I'll share this, and Jacqui, I don't know if like it'll resonate with you in any way, but not specifically with communication disorders, but more like support for the parent, because a lot of the kids do have a lot of misbehavior. And I remember this mom, her son is on the spectrum. Mm-hmm. At this point, he was about 8, give or take. And she was always so stressed and so overwhelmed. And there were a lot of things that they avoided: going to the grocery store, going out to a restaurant to eat. And I wanted to help her. So I needed to understand how I could help her, So I think that I had to expose myself to more techniques so that I could share with her how she could handle and manage some of those behavior moments. So Jacqui, that kind of relates to some of the work that maybe you do.
Yeah, and when I was working in that service, actually, our service covered young people with ASD on the spectrum. So we would do a lot of assessments and stuff. So that was an area of special interest of mine actually at the time. But then it changed, it moved to another service. So we had less of it, but I still worked with a lot of kids on the spectrum. Yeah, I absolutely know what you mean. Yeah.
What do you guys wish parents knew like obviously you're working specifically with young people, you know, in the roles that you've played, but it sounds like you've also had to balance the expectations of the parents, right? Empowering the parents, equipping them with to make sure that whatever you're doing also is followed, I imagine, followed up with. Like what do you wish parents knew that
You're
they
gonna
don't?
give me a soapbox now, Valerie.
Uh-oh.
This is one of my
Uh-oh.
favorite topics.
Go.
Is
Go.
Fabi, you won't know this, but I have three kids of my own, aged 12, 10, and 7. So that keeps me on my toes at home. My biggest thing about parents is I just wish parents cut themselves more slack. I think parents are so hard on themselves for the most part. I think parents are working so hard, and in our society there are so many expectations. You know, not only are you supposed to provide a roof and food and shelter for your child, you're supposed to provide an education, you're supposed to make sure that they have extracurricular activities, you're supposed to make sure that their mental health is fine, that they're not spending too much time on social media, that they have the right friends. Like, it's just endless. And I think parents just get so exhausted trying to do it all and be all things. And actually, I'm a little bit of an advocate of slightly lazy parenting, which sounds odd, but I allow my kids to get bored because I can see that boredom is where creativity happens. And I think a lot of parents worry that their kids are going, you know, if their child has a struggle, that this is going to turn into something huge and that they're going to have lifelong problems. And having worked in mental health services, I've seen loads of kids get better. And loads of kids do really, really well. And I think if you can bring down that anxiety, the parental anxiety, the kids do 10 times better, 10 times faster. And sometimes that's just about, I suppose, relating to parents and saying, you know what, you're doing a great job here. And you know, the fact that your child is a bit anxious or the fact that your teenager is a bit depressed, it's not all about you, and you don't have to blame yourself for everything. And you know, it's okay to not be the perfect parent because they're not the perfect child either. You know, and that's okay. And nobody's ever gotten it right across the whole history of time. And I kind of think my parents' generation, there was a lot more sort of it takes a whole village to raise a child. There's a lot of community. There were a lot of aunties and uncles and bigger families and people helping each other out. And now people are quite isolated. And I think the pandemic has really illustrated that, you know, and so that's made it even harder. And like, I'm lucky I have a very hands-on supportive husband, and I think, God, people, you know, single parents are just, I just can't imagine how much work they have to do to be all things to their kids. And I'm just in awe of what single parents do, you know. So I would love if parents just allowed themselves to just breathe and go, you know what, it's okay, they'll be fine. Most people turn out fine. It's okay, even if they have their wobbles, it'll be fine.
Lazy parenting. Fabi, I saw you and noticed you nodding and smiling there. What was resonating for you?
Yeah, I agree. I specifically, going back to that mom, I told her, you can't, if you're at Target or at the store and your child is having a meltdown, you can't worry about the other people. They do not know what's going on. They don't. And if you stress yourself with how the tantrum that he's having, you're gonna, it's too much for you. And then I also tell my parents or my families when I'm working with them, you know, even as grown-ups, if you missed your snack, you didn't sleep well, you're gonna be a little bit, on edge too. So it's okay. And like Jacqui said earlier, just cut yourself some slack. Just relax. We're all human.
Yeah. I missed my snack today. So if I'm a little on edge, now you know why. I got plenty of sleep though, so I think that's compensating for it. No, I think that's really interesting. And you know what it reminded me of is, so when we observe other children, and I'm curious about the two of you. I know, Faby, you don't have kids. Jacqui, you have 3. I don't have children. I have 9 nieces and nephews, 5 who live close by. And what's interesting is when I observe them behave or misbehave, I often think about like, when I was their age, I never, like my parents would have never, right? So there's some judgment about what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate, what I think their kids at that age should be doing and whatever. So I'm curious, and maybe you don't want to say it here, but what do you secretly judge when working with kids? Like, is there a little comparison that happens? Like, well, when I work with these types of children, or when I work in these environments, or when I remember my own childhood, like, where do you start to notice your judgmental self?
Ooh, that's a hard question, Valerie.
I know.
I'm thinking I would struggle most with teenagers where I was working with where the parents weren't on board. Actually, the opposite. You know, you have loads of parents who stress out because they want to get it right and they want to do everything they can to help, and sometimes exhaust themselves trying to fix everything. And then you have occasionally parents who are just completely hands off. And that was always a bit bothersome because, well, certainly for me working with teenagers, I sometimes felt like I was the responsible adult in their life, you know, and that's a lot of responsibility as a therapist or a clinician to hold when you feel like, oh my God, this kid actually doesn't have an adult who's looking out for them or who is minding them in that way, you know, emotionally or whatever. That's the bit where I would struggle a bit and go, oh, come on, you know, how are we going to just get these parents on board somehow or bridge that gap?
So there's a lazy parent spectrum, it sounds like.
Yeah.
There's a little too
yes.
much loose. Yes, there's a little bit of engagement that's required, at least to create the support system, it sounds like.
Yeah, well, there's a whole attachment thing, and Faby will be very familiar with this, working with speech as well. There's a whole layer of attachment underneath everything.
What do you
So
mean
if you haven't got that basic connection, and it doesn't take a huge amount, you know, a lot of the research says if you are doing good connecting with your child 30% or more of the time, you're going to have a securely attached child. And that's not too bad. You know, most parents find that, oh my God, that's actually not too bad. I think I'm okay, you know, whereas we kind of think it should be 80% or 90% or whatever. But if you get occasionally families who are doing like 10%, that's the worry. That's the hard bit, because it's very hard to fix a broken attachment. It's easy to fix the problems that are on the surface. If that's there, if that core bit is there, you can work with anybody. But if they don't want to do that, if they don't feel connected to their kid, that's really hard.
Oof. Fabi, what are your thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, kind of going back a little to what you had asked earlier.
What you judge about children or parents?
Yes. On my end, I feel like it is a spectrum. You are going to have those parents that are very lazy per se, or just don't.
Let's call it hands off, hands on. Maybe lazy puts a little stigma.
Yeah, like that dedication, you know? And I think that occasionally I did have those parents where I would give them very simple instructions. Like I did research and prepared all of this information and provided them with all of these skills to continue to do at home with them, and they wouldn't do it. And that was disappointing. And those were the moments where I was like, I'm giving you everything on a pedestal. You shouldn't be doing this. This is great stuff. This is how you're gonna see your child make progress. And they were just very dismissive of it. It's a small percentage. I think a lot of people fall in the range of like, okay, I try. Sometimes they get around to it. That's where probably the majority falls. But there's that percentage that's just not consistently giving that dedication.
How do you manage the level of energy? I mean, your commitment to the work you do, the challenges that you have to face, the responsibility that you take on, the people who hold you responsible or have expectations. Like, how do you guys take care of yourselves? Like, what do you do to ground yourself, to not let all those things hang out and weigh you down?
on my end, I have to remember that I'm not magic. So I'm not gonna just, correct everything. I'm gonna do my absolute best, and to re-energize or to give them your all, you really just have to look at them. They deserve the best from you. And just by looking at them, you're gonna give it your all, because there are gonna be those days where I missed my snack, I didn't go to sleep when I had to, so my energy level may just not be at that optimal level. However, seeing them reminds you that they deserve the best from you, and it's a boost of energy.
So getting sleep and getting your snack, that's all that you require.
You're definitely honestly, high on the list.
Yeah,
for sure.
Honestly, as well as just talking to colleagues or having support. I see a therapist, and it's been super, super helpful in kind of bringing myself to that human level versus like being magical and just correcting everything. Because I think when I was younger, that was kind of more the mentality that I had. And now I've come to really understand, no, I'm human and it's okay.
Jacqui?
Yeah, I took up drumming. To get out of a bit of frustration in my early 40s, which is a bit late. I'm a bit of a late bloomer. No, it was very intense work, and that's why, big part of why I made a change last year and took a break from it, because I'd been doing it nonstop pretty much for 17 years. I experienced burnout a couple of times, not to a level, very, very much a functioning burnout, where I was able to continue working, and giving the young people I was working with everything, but then I would have almost nothing left by the time I got home for anybody else or anything else. So I had to kind of deal with that very quickly. It took a while to realize what was happening, because they were two very different experiences for two different reasons. But dealing with that was just kind of not taking on new stuff, getting more sleep, trying to get more rest at home, trying to switch off more, all of that kind of stuff. But I do think a certain amount of the training I had, even in college and on placement and stuff, was very helpful. And my second job, when I was working with adults, I learned something really valuable, which was that idea that you mentioned, Faby, of not feeling kind of all magical or omnipotent, maybe sometimes, that you're not God, you can't fix everything. And I really learned that the hard way when I was working with adults, because I worked with a couple of adults who had a lot of suicidal thoughts. And I remember 1 or 2 Fridays with different people that I would have a very emotional person telling me how suicidal they were, and I would call on one of the doctors to do a sort of an assessment, a risk assessment, because I was afraid to let them go for the weekend because they were very distressed, and the doctors who would see them would go, oh, they're fine, they're grand, and let them go. And I worried the whole weekend about whether I was going to see them the next week. And then they came in the following week, happy, had a great weekend, everything was well, and I just realized, oh my God, they literally offloaded the whole lot on me on Friday and left it in my office and walked away from it. And I carried it, and I kind of thought, what are you doing, you idiot? You it's not your job to fix everything. They're grown-ups, they're adults, they're going to make decisions. Hopefully they'll make the right decisions. You equip them, you give them everything you have and all the support, but then you have to let go and trust that they're going to make the right decision. And if they don't, you can't hold that. You can't, you see them for an hour, you're not God. You don't control their universe, their circumstances, or their decisions. So you have to learn how to let go. And that was a really valuable lesson for me professionally, to switch off when I came home. So I think that helped a lot. And there was a lot of training involved, I think, as well, in learning to switch off. So even things like changing your clothes when you came in, or you can't carry too much work home when you have kids, because you're in the door and you're into another role. And I used to joke about having 4 shifts in my day. You know, morning shift was getting everybody up and breakfast and out to school, and then there was work, and then there was evening shift, which is getting everybody fed and homework done and all of that, and then there was night shift, which was everything else happened, all the family plans and holidays and whatever else had to happen then after bedtime. So it was like having 4 shift lifestyle, you know.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah,
I think about in terms of sorry, I cut you off. What were you saying?
No, it's okay. But it is good because it compartmentalized things. So, you know, you go home from work and you don't have time to think about it because there's kids in your house to be fed or collected or taken to soccer or whatever.
I think, you said a couple of things, both of you have, when it comes to the self-care piece. And I was just thinking about for myself, my mom brought this up actually in conversation the other day, because she said, I'm a leadership coach. And so I'm talking to people one-on-one on a regular basis or facilitating workshops. And she asked me, what do you do so that all that stuff doesn't stick with you? Like, when people are dealing with things that are difficult or challenging, or supporting them and creating some strategy. And it's interesting. So I think something shifted this year, and I can't quite place my finger on what it is yet. But I've had a meditation practice for the last 4 or 5 years, daily for the most part. So I think that also helps ground me. Things don't tend to stick as easily. I feel like I'm a lot more centered, so I don't feel like I have to grab it. But there's something particular that the two of you said that's interesting, about being magical or omnipotent, that there are moments now that I'm much more conscious that, it's not my problem to fix. Oh yeah, wait, no, it's not my problem to fix. I'm just a resource. I might provide an experience of using certain tools or modality that helps them sort it for themselves. But I don't have to carry the problem solving, the record player, the responsibility. Yeah, I don't have to carry that. And, to your point, Jacqui, I remember in a couple of occasions when I felt like a coaching session that did not go well. Like things didn't seem to land. I don't really feel like they made the progress that they could have made. I should have done this instead, or I should have asked that instead, or whatever. And then like the next session, it was like, oh my gosh, guess what? I did. And I was like, I was kind of disappointed after that session, but something like opened up. So I think from those experiences, I started to learn that actually my job is, if I could just point people in a direction in the conversation, or that's actually plenty. And then, we as adults, we know like how to fill in the blanks if we need to, or take the next step when we need to. But just a small nudge actually can be a huge shift for people, but we don't have to be the shift.
Yes, and I love that. And I love that idea. And I used to say to parents coming in as well, this is a process. I don't therapy anybody, because you can't. If somebody doesn't want to engage in the process, they're not going to engage. So it's a two-way thing. So, if I can connect with a young person and they're willing to talk to me, then we make progress. But all I've got to work with is what they tell me. So if they choose not to tell me anything, I'm stuck. I'm useless. So I love that idea that it's something that happens in the middle, that it's not me, it's not them, it's something that happens in the middle with that relationship and that connection.
It's the alchemy.
Yeah, exactly. It is.
Yeah. Faby, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I think it can be a challenge, definitely, like we can get very involved, we can get very detailed with things, and almost to an extent want to have too much control of things, and that's just not healthy. And sometimes like kind of like how you just let go and you were just more, well, we'll see how it goes. I gave it my all. Then you do see this progress, or you do see these little things, and then you kind of saved yourself energy by letting go and not keeping it, as a priority per se.
I think you just said something really interesting. The idea of using energy, like if the purpose is actually to create energy in the experience for them to propel themselves, but not to be the energy source.
Yes.
Like to create a dependency or an attachment. but just to generate energy in the conversation or in the exercise or whatever, so that they can start to produce whatever results they want. Yeah, that's interesting. Huh. What do you guys do for fun? I mean, after all of this stuff that you're talking about, really profound. I mean, you're talking about holding people's well-being in your hands for at least that session, right? Or many people's well-beings. How do you just relax or blow off steam, or drumming? I know, and getting a snack and sleep. I get that, but beyond that.
I like Zumba. I love dancing, so I do Zumba as often as I can. I'm exploring more activities that I can do. I haven't, with the pandemic, of course, it's been kind of a slow thing, but I want to do like kickboxing or something, just where I can release my energy. But Zumba for sure.
Zumba. Yeah, and drumming is fairly new for me, just the last few years, and I just love it because you get to take out any frustration you have. I'm in a small class of 4 of us. We joke about being the geriatric class. We're all over 40, latecomers. We have a teacher who's great fun, and actually, honestly, half of the class is spent teasing each other, making jokes, innuendos. Like it's just wild.
What kind of drumming?
Yeah.
What kind of drumming is it?
Drum kit drumming.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
In a class? Like, do you have multiple people on drum kits?
Yes. Yeah. Electric kits, and the teacher's on a proper kit.
Okay.
An acoustic kit. So yeah, it's fun. It's
interesting.
Fun. But, yeah. So that's my big one, I suppose. I love art. I love writing. I like keeping in touch with people. I connect with friends. That's probably my biggest energizer, is meeting friends and meeting people and talking to people I like talking to, like here. I just get great energy. I love people, and I'm really curious about people. So yeah, I get a lot of energy from other people.
I'm the same way. I'm trying to remember, Jacqui, what was it that why did I reach out to you or you reach out to me? Like, what was it? Well,
I think because I started up a new business, I think you popped up on LinkedIn or something as a suggested connection or something like that. So I was trying to figure out how all of that stuff worked, because this is a whole new adventure for me, and trying to reconnect with people and find a new tribe in a way, because I, like you said, Faby, the support at work and the colleagues are huge for keeping you sane, and that coffee room was just a haven in the storm of every day, and not to have that anymore is a little strange. So I'm pushing myself to sort of find my new group, and sometimes that's online, and now thankfully the lockdown here has lifted a little bit, so we're able to have a coffee outside or go for a walk with friends, and I'm partially vaccinated so far, and lots of my friends are now as well, so that gives us a little bit more freedom. So yeah, meeting people for coffees and connecting with people, even on Zoom, talking to friends, WhatsApp, whatever, just staying connected.
Is that why you started drinking coffee, so that you could stay connected with people?
That is exactly why I started.
Are you serious?
Coffee. No.
I think you missed it, Faby. You may have dropped at that point, but you might tell Jacqui, you might tell Faby what you told me about your habit, all your habits.
I was explaining that I'm a slightly unusual Irish person, because I don't drink tea, and I didn't drink coffee till I was in my 40s. I didn't drink alcohol till I was 26, which is probably unheard of for an Irish person. And I took up the drums at 41. So I think I'm doing everything backwards. So I reckon by the time I'm 70, I'll be doing hard drugs or all the stuff that I, might have done in college that I didn't do. I'm a bit of a late bloomer.
Is there a reason that you tried some of those things at a later time versus peers did it at a sooner type of thing?
I know, yes, this is a whole long story. It might be an interesting one, but I suppose take alcohol, for example. Culturally, most people will drink in their late teens, if not earlier in Ireland, but definitely by the time they're heading to college, most people will drink, some socially and some perhaps to excess. I didn't. Neither of my parents drink, which is probably a part of it. and but not anti-drink. There was always alcohol in my house. My mother would be very generous. My friends loved coming to visit my house because my mother would give measures that were way above and beyond normal measures and be a bit clueless
She didn't know.
So it wasn't that there was any anti-alcohol vibe, but I just didn't, and I didn't. It felt right for me, and I didn't understand why. And there were 1,000 small reasons, but none that made sense to me. And until I was 26, and I had this aha moment at 26, which is really funny now when I look back on it, where I realized that not drinking was a little bit of a rebellious act. It was a sort of a statement of individuality. I did not want to do what people wanted me to do. I was like, no, I will do, if I want to drink, I'll drink when I'm ready to drink and when I feel like drinking, and not because I should or because everybody's doing it. It was a sort of a conservative rebellion. And when I understood that, then I kind of went, oh, okay. Well, actually, whether I drink alcohol or I don't drink alcohol is not who I am as a person, and it doesn't define my individuality. So I can let that go now. That's okay. So it was a bit of a strange one.
Fascinating. I think I had my first alcoholic drink when I was 21, which is the legal age here, because I was not again, my parents also did not drink. We didn't have any alcohol at home, or if we did, it was because someone left it there from a gathering of some sort. They brought a bottle of wine or some beer or something, but we're like, I don't remember seeing my parents drink, which I know they did, but it was never like a thing for us. And so, yeah, alcohol has never been a big part. And I was very judgmental when I was in college. I'm probably still a little judgmental, truth be told, but about other things. But I remember just kind of like my first college party, and everybody was drinking and was really to excess in many cases. And the conversations were so inane. I'm like, how can anybody enjoy a party when you can't talk to people because they don't make any sense? I was just like, I can't be here. I can't be around drunk people because I can't stand having to have the same conversation over and over again. And as much as I love to talk, I was like, this is not fulfilling. So a lot of it had to do with that. And, of course, I have had more than that since then, but it's like, it's never been high on my list of anything.
No, not for me. But interestingly, I was really surprised that I never in my entire youth never ever experienced any peer pressure about drinking ever when I didn't drink. And it wasn't until I started taking an occasional drink, and I still don't drink very much, but when I started to drink, that was when I experienced the peer pressure.
What?
It's very interesting.
What do you mean?
When it was black and white, I just didn't drink, and people accepted that, and they said, oh, she doesn't drink, Whereas when I started to take a drink, then it was, would you like a glass of wine? I'd say, no, I'm fine. Go on, have a glass of wine. You want a glass of wine. Go on, I'll pour you one. Go on. And this starts, and this is, it was mild. It wasn't any sort of major pressure, but it was really, I never experienced any persuasion around alcohol until I drank. And it was like, you need to, maybe it's an Irish thing, maybe it's a cultural thing. You sometimes feel like you need to justify not drinking if you're out. So you have to kind of say, well, I'm not drinking tonight because I'm the designated driver. Whereas if you don't drink, it's just, no, I don't drink. Because if I went to the pub with my friends in my late 30s or my mid 30s, maybe before I had kids, and I said, oh, I'm not drinking tonight, they'd be like, are you pregnant? Straight away. No, I'm not pregnant. Are you the designated driver? No, I just don't want to drink. I was like, go on, have a glass of wine. So it's a funny thing. I was really surprised by that.
That's fascinating. Faby, where do you stand on all this? How we ended up talking about specifically alcohol, our Irish guest to turn us in that direction.
I've had instances where I just, I'm not planning to drink, but I just, so that people will get off your back, you just accept the cup and you just don't drink it. They're like, oh, you're still full. Yeah, I'm good. And you just, they get off your back because they want you to be part of that community that's drinking. And kind of going back to like, when people are already inebriated, and I remember I got to a party, and for me it was funny because by the time I got there, everybody was pretty much drunk already, and I thought it was funny how like they were just laughing, and their inhibitions were down, and people were just being very silly. So that was my experience with that.
Well, I think the thing for me is that alcohol makes me very sleepy. So I personally, I mean, I'll like a little champagne or something like that, a glass of wine, maybe. But I feel pretty uninhibited generally, and I'm pretty joyful anyways, but it depressed me. And I didn't like that. I didn't like feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to like stay awake, or I felt like I had to somehow bring some level of energy because it just didn't do anything for me. So I think it's fascinating. And I don't drink coffee. I just don't care for I like the smell. I think the smell is kind of nice, but
I was the same. I was the same. I hated the taste of it, but I loved the smell of it. But then somebody introduced me to a latte with some kind of cocoa thing in it, and it was like, ooh, this is kind of like hot chocolate with a kick. I could do this. And that was that. Then I'm like one coffee a day. That's it now,
Faby, coffee drinker?
I have black coffee. Yes.
Oh, you like mainline this stuff. Okay.
Yeah. And I love tea. I have chamomile tea, English breakfast. I have all kinds of teas at home, and we have a good variety, but I definitely do black coffee. I think people are surprised, especially like if I'm, going through a drive-through and I ask for black coffee. They're like, you don't want sugar and cream? Are you sure?
You don't have any special, like the special Starbucks orders where you have all these like half cup, full pump. I don't even know what this stuff is.
I know it gets creative. The reason I try to have my beverages without sugar is that I know a couple of years ago I had put on a lot of weight, and I started talking with the trainer, and we realized that a lot of my calories were coming from sweet tea, with sugar, and I just kind of started having everything without sugar.
I need Faby in my life.
Brave. I think that's brave. I need sugar in my life.
I need to lessen the impact of sugar on my life, but look, I know we could go on and on. I can't believe the time has already flown by so much, but I want to ask you guys, what was this experience like? I know we started talking about kind of, your career and got a little bit heavy in some areas there around it, and then ended up talking about getting drunk and drinking coffee. So look at that. So how did we do going from the speakable to the unspeakable, would you guys say, in this podcast?
I think we did really good. I think that the conversation just flowed. I think that we, it flowed.
How did you feel?
Good, happy, excited, relaxed.
And at the beginning, before we started, like if you could compare and contrast when we started to now, what would you say is different?
I think I'm more relaxed. I think that I just needed to put my feet in the water. So it was a lot of fun. I was really excited that you paired me with somebody from Ireland. I know I said earlier that I've always wanted to visit, and I just thought it was so cool. So I was super excited. But it was very filling. It was a great conversation.
Hey, Jacqui, what about for you?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it too. I love conversations that go in crazy directions, although I'm quite sure that after this I will go and go, oh, what did you say that for? But I'm not going to overthink it. I'm not going to overthink it. I'm this is me. Take it or leave it.
We'll take it.
Yeah, so.
And all, is not unusual, including me. I've had those moments where I call it a vulnerability hangover in some cases, right? You share something, you're like, why did I say that? Oh, I didn't want to talk about it like that or whatever. And I say thank you. I'm glad that you did. What was the most interesting or surprising thing about this conversation for both of you?
Honestly?
Yeah, honestly.
Oh, no.
Jacqui's milestones with some beverages and items.
The fact that she's going to do hard drugs when she's 70.
That was a joke. I just think I'm doing everything backwards, but I'm hoping that I'm going to get younger looking as well. by doing
Hey.
things in the opposite direction.
Benjamin Button McGovern.
I know. Well, you asked about the impact of working with young people, and I would genuinely say it keeps you young because it keeps you on your toes. You stay tuned into what's going on for them as well, and I hope that there's a little bit of that's true.
Any surprises for you or anything that you found interesting, Jacqui?
No, I really loved learning about what you do, Faby, and chatting to you, and I just really enjoyed the conversation. It was great.
Yay. So I'm curious, I know I asked most of the questions, but what questions would you have asked? Or would you like to ask?
I was curious to know what age group you work with, Faby. It sounds like it's younger, early intervention, is it?
The bulk of my experience is with early intervention. I just started working for a school district, so now I do elementary.
Okay. Yeah.
So they're still young and at that awesome age. And it's actually been quite interesting because I have so much experience with like those preschoolers, and now being with the personalities, how they change, and some of the conversations that you can have. And it's been very neat.
Cool. Good stuff. Have you any questions?
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I did ask the ones that in the moment where I was curious about the beverage selection and, you know, ages when you decided to have them. And I think when you were explaining how you went through school and the different stages, like I feel like that was new information for me as far as like how Ireland worked compared to, I guess, my experience here in America.
What do you mean? In what way is that different?
Because she had to get placed with the Child Protective Services. And I don't know if we have to do that here, like if it's
yeah. Well, that was more for university for a placement in social work. You had 2 placements that you had to do, and they had to be varied. But one of them, there was a kind of a general. It wasn't an absolute rule, but there was a kind of a general requirement that you would do 3 months in child protection to get a sense of how that worked, and because that was where the majority of the jobs were. Okay. So yeah.
Interesting. First of all, this was the first podcast either of you have done. What are you taking away from this experience?
I love the fact that it can go anywhere. The conversation could go in any direction. I kind of like the unpredictability of it.
Unpredictability. That's my middle name sometimes. Sometimes I just get bored with the conversation. Not bored, but like, okay, let's find something else to talk about. Just like you would if we were in person, likely, right? Or if we had more time. So that's, sometimes I throw a little bit of a spin in there. So cool, I'm glad. Unpredictability gets a point. Faby, what about for you? What are you taking away from this first experience?
I really enjoyed it. I liked how there was a little structure, but there was so much room for us to make our own direction with it. I thought that was really neat, and I really enjoyed it.
Yay. Well, you're welcome to connect beyond this. You know, I facilitate the first one, but anything after that is up to you.
Well, Faby's got to come to Galway now.
Yeah, now you have to go. That's it.
It's going on my vision board.
Hey. And Jacqui, hey, come to Texas.
Yeah, I think it might be a bit hot for me.
Well, you don't have to come in the summer.
What's the coldest season?
December 18th. Okay. That is the day.
I'll remember that date.
No, I don't know. Yeah, it's not a very lengthy season of chilled weather or cool weather here, but you know, we get all 4. We get all 4 seasons, so we don't complain. Well, actually, that's not true. A lot of people complain. I enjoy all of it. Like right now, it just started raining all of a sudden, like completely, the skies burst open, and it was super sunny earlier, and it'll be nice and humid for a while, and then the sun will come out and it'll be 100 degrees again, Fahrenheit, and it'll be great.
And you look at that. We went from a sweater in this heat.
Sorry?
You look like you're wearing a sweater.
Oh, that's only for video. Because I love that. This color looks good on me. That's all. All of us wore like these royal colors. I love it. Like the navy and dark green and the purple. Very nice. We all coordinated and we didn't even talk about it. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you both so much for saying yes and allowing me to sponsor and host your first podcast experience. And I'm glad to hear that you took something away or that you found it relaxing and easy to get into the conversation and appreciated the unpredictability. Any final words as we close our time together?
Thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed hearing from Jacqui and her story and her experience in the mental health world. So thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I echo that. Absolutely. Thanks a million.
Absolutely. Well, anytime. There are other opportunities, by the way, not only for the two of you, but also for our listeners. We host on a quarterly basis a gathering for not only those who have participated in the podcast as guests, but also our special listeners who'd like to connect with them. And this is an opportunity to continue to build your Not Quite Strangers network with other people who are not quite strangers, because you've either seen them on the podcast or you heard them. And we will be sending that out. If you subscribe to our list, our mailing list, you'll get an invitation and it's free of charge. It's just an opportunity for us to build a community. If you go to www.notquitestrangers.com and subscribe there, you will get all the episodes, including this one, straight into your inbox so you don't miss a single one. We also share connection challenges every other week. So beyond just listening to interesting conversations like the one we just had, people who would like to participate and continue to expand their own communities in their world and wherever they live, these connection challenges are to do just that. And then we have our quarterly meetings, like I said. So make sure that you subscribe, www.notquitestrangers.com, so you get a chance to get in on all of that fun. All right, Jacqui, Faby, it's been a treat. Thank you so very much for everything that you shared. I think there are also some really wonderful treats. So for those families who are dealing with things either in mental health spectrum or working with the students that have, or children that have speech impediments or speech challenges, obviously the two of you are pros. And if you're open to it, I'd love to include your contact information or website or email or whatever you think is appropriate. So look for that in the show notes and you can reach out to them for any resources or ideas or recommendations. Yes?
Yes.
Fantastic. I mean, I've asked you on air, so I kind of obligated you to share it. You don't have to. We'll put a bogus one if you decide not to. Oh, what? This link is no longer active? No worries. All right. Thank you, ladies, so much. Thank you all for joining us for this episode of Not Quite Strangers. Looking forward to the next one. Have a wonderful rest of the day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You've been listening to the podcast Not Quite Strangers. Be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite video or podcast platform. And for more information and content, go to notquitestrangers.com. See you next time.